5 years ago, Disney revealed the biggest Star Wars slate in history. Over 10 new Star Wars projects announced in 2020, including video games, films, and TV series. We just had the release of Disney Plus and also The Mandalorian Season 1.
Now with Disney Plus, we can explore limitless story possibilities like never before, and fulfill the promise that there is truly a Star Wars story for everyone.
The hype was unbelievable, but today, things look very different.
The Star Wars latest series has gone fully woke.
Star Wars The Acolyte has been cancelled.
You know, Star Wars is a hot mess.
Battlefront Classic Collection. Unacceptable.
Star Wars went from being a juggernaut to a laughingstock.
So, what happened? What went wrong? On December 10, 2020, Disney gave us the Disney Investor Day, with the Lucasfilm section presented by Kathleen Kennedy announcing a bunch of new Star Wars projects.
What could possibly go wrong?
This at the time literally felt like the rebirth of Star Wars, like Star Wars stepping once again into the modern era. We were on the verge of greatness. This close. In this video, I'm going to take a look at every Star Wars project that was announced at this event and around this time and where it ended up. We're also going to assess each project and determine whether it was successful, whether it failed, or whether it was kind of mid. Hey everyone, it's Andrew. Ahsoka.
And the other featuring fan favorite, Ahsoka Tano.
Following the success of The Mandalorian Season 1, it was announced that Jon Favreau and Dave Filoni were developing 2 spin-off series from The Mandalorian, set in the same era of the timeline. And the first of those series was Ahsoka. Released in 2023 as a spin-off from The Mandalorian and from Star Wars Rebels, and technically also as a spin-off from The Clone Wars, Ahsoka was met with a mostly positive reception from Star Wars fans. And yes, even though this series gave us frustrating things like characters getting stabbed by lightsabers and surviving like nothing happened,
by all accounts, it doesn't make sense.
it also gave us some of the most memorable villains in Star Wars in recent years, with Baylan Skoll, Shin Hati, and the return of Grand Admiral Thrawn. Season 2 is currently set to release in 2026, with Season 1 ending on somewhat of a cliffhanger, and the events of the series likely eventually leading to the Dave Filoni movie, combining characters from Ahsoka, the Book of Boba Fett, and The Mandalorian. Overall, I think most of us would agree Ahsoka was a success. But the same can't be said for the other Dave Filoni and Jon Favreau series, Rangers of the New Republic.
The new spin-off series exclusively for Disney Plus. 1, The Rangers of the New Republic.
This series was set to star Gina Carano as Cara Dune, and would act as a spin-off to her character's involvement in The Mandalorian. However, this one really didn't make it far at all. It was cancelled in 2021, and according to Kathleen Kennedy, no scripts were even written for the series. All they had really was the title card and the idea. But this wasn't just a smooth cancellation. The series' cancellation ended up being quite controversial. Around the time it was cancelled, Disney had reportedly fired Gina Carano for certain comments she'd made on Twitter. In 2024, Carano filed a lawsuit against Disney to be compensated for wrongful termination and to be compensated for Rangers of the New Republic's cancellation.
What could possibly go wrong?
This was settled out of court in 2025, but overall, what more can we say? This entire series was a complete and utter fail. Obi Wan Kenobi.
We announced the return of Ewan McGregor in the iconic role of Jedi Master Obi Wan Kenobi for a special event series on Disney Plus.
Although this series was originally announced in 2019 and it was confirmed that Ewan McGregor would be returning as Obi-Wan, in 2021 we got the confirmation that the series was indeed going ahead and that Hayden Christensen would be joining the cast. Originally the series was set to be 8 episodes, it only ended up being 7 in the end, and I think we also need to take into account this show was largely filmed and produced during COVID. People did criticize the production value, the look of the show sometimes feeling flat, the overly shaky camera work, which has been fixed by several fan projects, the fact multiple characters in this series get stabbed by lightsabers and somehow survive, RIP Qui-Gon. But I think you could argue it was all worth it for that final confrontation between Obi-Wan and Vader. But even though that was epic, you can't ignore some of the more obvious flaws, like the characters escaping from this heavily guarded Imperial base and Obi-Wan hiding Leia under his coat, as if no one's gonna notice. Are you serious? I don't think we got the series we all wanted, and I think a lot of you agree, this show was pretty mid. Andor.
One of the most exciting and ambitious new series we have coming to Disney Plus in 2022 is Andor.
Before Andor released, I think almost everyone was skeptical about this series. The idea that they were making a spin-off series about that guy from Rogue One, it seemed at the time like it was really left field and was really leaning away from the fan service you could argue other series like The Mandalorian and Obi Wan were delivering on. That said, little did we know it would turn out to be one of the greatest, most mature, most adult, most well-developed Star Wars projects ever created. Andor is arguably the biggest surprise Star Wars has ever delivered, with series creator Tony Gilroy being given heaps of creative control to develop the kind of dark, gritty spy thriller in the Star Wars galaxy we never knew we needed. Revered by fans and critics, the series has gone down as one of the greatest Star Wars projects ever created, with the climax in Season 2 giving us some unforgettable, heartbreaking moments in the Star Wars galaxy. In a lot of ways, Andor is a lot less fantastical than a lot of the other Star Wars projects announced around this time, and feels incredibly grounded in realism. It's a look at what Star Wars is like for the regular people in the galaxy, delving into the formation of the rebellion, and paints the Empire in a way that makes them seem scarier than they do in any other Star Wars project. Andor was also largely filmed in real-life locations, unlike most of the other Star Wars series, which are filmed on sound stages and using the volume technology. But overall, I think we'd all agree Andor is a huge success. Unfortunately, the same can't be said for Lando.
Lando Calrissian is the galaxy's smoothest, most notorious scoundrel, and he'll return in a brand new event series for Disney+.
This is one of those Star Wars projects that Disney seemingly announced with no real concrete direction. It was also revealed that Justin Simien was developing the series, that Donald Glover was returning as Lando Calrissian, reprising the role he played in Solo: A Star Wars Story, but it seems like this one really didn't get anywhere following 2020. Kathleen Kennedy said in 2022 in relation to the series that they were waiting for Donald Glover to finish other projects before they moved forward with this one. But in 2023, Simeon revealed in an interview that he hadn't really heard anything that's going on with the series since 2020, since it was announced, even though he was the one creating the series. In 2023, it was confirmed that development on this series had shifted its focus to turning it into a film instead of a series. About a year later, it was revealed that Simeon was no longer involved with the project, and since then, we really haven't heard much about it. This one is likely never going to see the light of day, never going to be made, so what a complete fail. The Acolyte.
The Acolyte is a mystery thriller that will take us into a galaxy of shadowy secrets and emerging dark side powers in the final days of the High Republic era.
This is arguably the most controversial Star Wars series Disney has made, and suddenly offers a different look at the Star Wars galaxy. Set during the High Republic era, the 8 episodes make this the second most expensive Star Wars series ever made, just behind Andor, which I think a lot of people argued is strange because this show was certainly not the prettiest looking Star Wars series. I personally really liked some of the lightsaber duels in this. I liked the idea of Chimera, the Stranger, and even though you could argue it gave us some of the most brutal deaths in all of Star Wars, overall I think most people would agree this series was kind of a flop, or just wasn't for everyone. It suddenly has its dedicated fan base, who after the announcement that Season 2 was cancelled, tried to bring it back to life, especially considering the series ends kind of in limbo, and also gives us our first on-screen look at Darth Plagueis. Majority of viewers though, I just don't think wanted Star Wars to head in this direction, and there were certainly some strange moments.
You get nauseous when you travel through hyperspace?
I don't get sick. I find it unsettling.
Maybe this is controversial, but overall, based on the reception of The Acolyte, I think we have to call this one a fail. It certainly didn't live up to the expectations of what most fans expected it to be. Rogue Squadron.
Patty, director of the Wonder Woman franchise, will bring her inspired vision to Rogue Squadron.
Surely this is one of the most embarrassing things Lucasfilm has done in the Disney era, announcing the next Star Wars film set to release in 2023 and then never acknowledging its existence again, even going as far as to remove the trailer from Star Wars' YouTube channel and other social platforms.
What could possibly go wrong?
Star Wars Rogue Squadron was set to be Star Wars returning to the big screen following The Rise of Skywalker, and was set to be directed by Patty Jenkins. According to StarWars.com, the story will introduce a new generation of starfighter pilots pilots as they earn their wings and risk their lives in a boundary-pushing, high-speed thrill ride and move the saga into the future era of the galaxy. Apparently, the project was initially delayed due to Patty Jenkins' other commitments to her other projects, but in 2023, this one was quietly shelved and no longer in production. On a positive note, Star Wars Starfighter, which is currently being filmed, seems like it'll have similar themes to what Rogue Squadron was going to be, but seriously man, this one was a complete fail. A droid story.
Lucasfilm Animation will be teaming up with our unparalleled visual effects team ILM to develop a special Star Wars adventure for Disney+, a droid story.
So apparently Lucasfilm Animation was supposed to team up with ILM to create an animated Star Wars series where we'd be introduced to a new hero guided by R2-D2 and C-3PO. What's crazy is that literally since this was announced all the way back in 2020, there has been almost zero mention of its existence. I have no idea if this is still in development somewhere behind the scenes. At the moment, it really doesn't seem so. You have to consider this one a complete, utter fail. The Bad Batch.
Building on the legacy of the Clone Wars, our new animated series, The Bad Batch, follows the Specialist Commandos of Clone Force 99.
In 2019, Lucasfilm gave us the much anticipated and requested Clone Wars Season 7. And they really delivered. They seriously cooked, especially with the final arc. But in the first arc of the season, we were introduced to the Bad Batch, Clone Force 99. And following the completion of the Clone Wars, most fans wondered what was next for Star Wars animation. Well, essentially, we were getting the continued stories of certain clone troopers following the events of Order 66 and the fall of the Republic. Added clones now find their new place in the galaxy. The Bad Batch ended up being 3 seasons, and yes, even though there are a lot of filler episodes, some of the payoff episodes were so epic. And this was especially the case when they focused on the clones themselves. The destruction of Kamino, clones questioning their morality, their inhibitor chips. For a series that's largely intended for a younger audience, there are certainly some dark moments here. And I think it's only fair that we consider The Bad Batch a success. Taika Waititi's film.
We're currently developing a brand new Star Wars feature with acclaimed filmmaker, Academy Award winner, Taika Waititi.
Now, apparently this movie is still currently in development, even though it's not in Disney's slate of upcoming Star Wars films. Taika Waititi is writing this himself, but the details around how far along it is in development are quite loose. In the years following 2020, Taika Waititi has been asked about this film in numerous interviews, usually saying something along the lines of he's still working on it, he's still writing it, he's still coming up with the ideas, and he wants to make it truly feel like it belongs in the Star Wars galaxy. But at the moment, a lot of these comments just feel like a lot of hot air. There's no real concrete evidence that this thing is ever going to see the light of day, and considering it's not in Disney's slate of upcoming Star Wars films, it likely won't be until the next decade until this gets made, if it ever ends up getting made. I don't know, man. At the moment, I feel like we have to call this one a fail. Star Wars Visions.
Star Wars Visions will be a series of animated short films celebrating the Star Wars galaxy through the lens of the world's best anime creators.
The idea behind Star Wars Visions, I think most people would agree, is really cool. Essentially get multiple animation studios to make their own Star Wars short with their own creative control and vision. To date, we've had 3 seasons of Star Wars Visions, the first airing in 2021, and as you can expect, I think with any anthology series, the quality of the episodes are a bit of a mixed bag. Standouts, I think most people would agree, are The Duel, The Ninth Jedi, which is getting its own spin-off series, and one of my favorites, The Pit. I really like that this series offers a lot of new perspectives to the Star Wars galaxy with the sheer amount of different storytelling opportunities from each studio, but overall, it's definitely not for everyone, and I don't think you'd say it's for the mainstream or casual Star Wars fan, who are most likely just watching series like The Mandalorian. That said though, I think certain acclaimed episodes have to make Star Wars Visions a success. Mandalorian Season 2. Some people argue that aside from Andor, this is the peak of Disney Star Wars. The Mandalorian Season 2 felt like it was taking Star Wars in a fresh, exciting direction. The relationship between Din Djarin and Grogu was getting even more adorable. Grogu's origins were still such a huge mystery. And the build up to the final episode with the return of Luke Skywalker, I think was a moment enjoyed by both casual and hardcore Star Wars fans. The fact the series essentially ended on a cliffhanger also, with Grogu going off with Luke to train train in the ways of the Force set up a lot of exciting prospects for the future of Star Wars. It felt like we were moving in the right direction. So where did it all go wrong? Well, at the end of season 2, in a post-credit scene, we got the reveal of the Book of Boba Fett, aka The Mandalorian Season 2.5. Star Wars fans, myself included, were so excited about the return of Boba Fett. Yes, Boba Fett survived the Sarlacc pit, and we were going to see exactly how he did that. For years, for decades, people had speculated that Boba Fett had survived the events of Return of the Jedi. And in this series, they were going to show us exactly how. It was also being directed by Robert Rodriguez, which I think most people were also excited for. This series, though, I think made most people feel more conflicted about Star Wars than they ever had before. Teenagers riding around on bikes, Boba Fett hanging out with the Tuskens. I didn't mind that so much.
Like a panther.
And the Mandalorian hijacking Boba Fett's show halfway through. And this for me, and I think for a lot of people, was the beginning of the end. Essentially, all of the hype and suspense built from the ending of The Mandalorian Season 2 was undone in a matter of episodes in the Book of Boba Fett. For whatever reason, they decided to reunite Grogu and the Mandalorian in the most underwhelming way possible in this series, in a spin-off series that most casual fans who watched The Mandalorian didn't even see. It was as if they got scared, as if they were worried people wouldn't be happy with The Mandalorian and Grogu being separated, that they belonged together, and they had to do everything possible to get them back together as soon as possible. Also, the Boba Fett we got in this series, I don't think turned out to be the Boba Fett most people have pictured and imagined for the past 40 years. For all these reasons, I think we have to consider the Book of Boba Fett mid. The Mandalorian Season 3. Even though this wasn't announced in 2020, I think most people could see it coming in the Book of Boba Fett because of where Mando Season 2 ended and where Book of Boba ended, connecting all of these events. The Mandalorian Season 3 just was kind of underwhelming. For whatever reason, in Mando Season 3, they pretty much reset his character, undoing a bunch of the character development and progression he'd made in Season 2. There are also a lot of weird moments in this season. That whole episode on Coruscant that didn't even really have the Mandalorian in it. Jack Black and Lizzo in Star Wars for some strange reason.
What could possibly go wrong?
This is just so mid. Now, something also happened in 2020 behind the scenes that would shape the future of Star Wars games, or the lack of future of Star Wars games, and that was the internal pitch made by EA developers to create Battlefront 3. It was around 2020 that developers at DICE and EA pitched the idea of Battlefront 3 to EA executives. This is also the year that Battlefront 2's continued development and support had been completely cancelled. And unfortunately, for a number of reasons, the pitch for Battlefront 3 was rejected. It was turned down. First of all, EA were moving a number of their resources to develop the next Battlefield game, which at the time was Battlefield 2042. How did that turn out to be? At least they got things right with Battlefield 6. Second of all, EA were also moving away from developing licensed properties and licensed games. Instead, they wanted to stick to their own IP, which was confirmed in a few statements by their CEO. EA's exclusive license to develop Star Wars games was also ending in 2023, and I think overall Battlefront 2 just hadn't fully recovered from the awful launch it had with the loot boxes and microtransactions, and I think EA decided they hadn't made enough money with Battlefront 2, so we're like, why would we make a third game? The idea and pitch for Battlefront 3 was a complete fail. LEGO Star Wars The Skywalker Saga. Although this was announced in 2019 and set to release in 2020, the game was delayed 2 times, eventually releasing on April 5th, 2022. Even though the Skywalker Saga is vastly different to the original LEGO Star Wars games from the mid-2000s, it delivered a memorable, hilarious experience, allowing players to travel to over 20 planets throughout the galaxy and play through the events of the entire 9 Skywalker Saga films in LEGO form. Especially at the time of its release, the Skywalker Saga was hugely popular and I think is definitely considered a success. Jedi Fallen Order's sequel, aka Jedi Survivor. Jedi Survivor wasn't announced until 2022, but following the first game which released at the end of 2019, I think everyone expected them to be making a second game. Even though it launched with a bunch of game-breaking bugs for certain players, it further developed and continued the story and tragedy of Cal Kestis in this post-Order 66 era, and some people even argue is one of the best Star Wars games ever made. There was also a third Jedi game currently in development, the third in the trilogy, and it's great that we're getting more story-driven single-player Star Wars action action-adventure games. Success. The Battlefront Classic Collection. This is a remaster of the two original Battlefront games from 2004 and 2005, released in early 2024, and arguably one of the biggest missed opportunities in Star Wars gaming in recent years. The fact that on PC, on Steam, the original Battlefront still has more players than the Classic Collection, and that there are mods that make the original Battlefront 2 look better than this, unfortunately make this one of the biggest fails in recent Star Wars gaming. With the end of EA's 10-year deal to be the exclusive developer of AAA Star Wars games, we got Ubisoft having a go at making their own Star Wars game. And in 2024, they gave us Star Wars Outlaws. And it wasn't without its controversy. Yes, it released a bit broken. Yes, the story is kind of forgettable. Yes, maybe it's not the Star Wars game you wanted. Outlaws does run smoother now than it did at launch, has found its own dedicated audience of players. There's definitely fun to be had in this game, but it's also definitely not for everyone. And for all these reasons, I think we have to consider this one pretty mid. Bounty Hunter Remastered. I love that I can say this, but Aspyr actually got this one right. When it was announced that this classic Star Wars game from 2002 was returning in 2024 with modern, updated controls and also updated graphics, I couldn't be more excited, and it honestly works so well. Yes, the game is still super janky at times. Yes, it's still ridiculously challenging at times, but the modern controls for this are seriously game-changing, and if you've never played Bounty Hunter, go do it. The story isn't canon anymore, but it's basically Jango Fett before he was enlisted by Count Dooku to become the template for the clone army. Success. Now, there are a bunch more Star Wars projects on the horizon that have been announced by Disney and Lucasfilm. Things like the Knights of the Old Republic remake, Star Wars Eclipse, Star Wars Starfighter, Dave Filoni's Star Wars movie, The Mandalorian, and Grogu. But considering everything that was announced in 2020 and the few years after, it's hard to believe Star Wars is in the place it is right now. So what happened? Where did it all go wrong? Well, oversaturation in Star Wars, I think, is one of the big issues. In the past few years, it seems Lucasfilm and Disney have certainly focused on quantity over quality, and even though some of these projects sounded promising, they certainly didn't deliver. I think it's also insane that they announced so much and yet basically cancelled half of what was announced in this investor day 5 years ago. But it seems that their outlook on the future is changing. The Mandalorian Grogu is releasing next year. Star Wars is returning to the cinemas with that, and then the following year also with Star Wars Starfighter. These projects are both going ahead, are both, at the time of recording this, definitely going to release. And let's hope that doesn't change. And Lucasfilm also seem to be pulling back on the amount of TV series they're producing. Disney Plus over the past few years has also been losing subscribers, and they've seen a downturn in the platform since the release of The Mandalorian and the huge success it was back in 2019 and 2020. And I think a lot of this is honestly just due to the quality of the series they're creating, with Andor and Ahsoka arguably being the exceptions. So let's do a bit of a reality check. Here is every project that was set to be releasing in the years following 2020. And this is where we are now. Lucasfilm and Disney certainly had huge ambitions for the future of Star Wars. Let's just hope that from this point on, they don't continue to announce projects that don't end up getting made. But all this said, I'd love to know what you think could have gone differently for Lucasfilm, Disney, and the Star Wars franchise over the past 5 years. For more Star Wars, watch this video here, and thanks for watching this. Always remember,
Stay bombastic.